everyone else that has, gone about life with their privilege, experienced a little bit of what we go through in a day-to-day. What communities that fear leaving their home because there are redadas or raids happening in your neighborhoods, and then you have to isolate and wait until you think it's safe to come back out or go back to work. Immigrant communities experience isolation for as long as they have been here. And so others that had access to a level of privilege in their life experience through the pandemic what most of our communities go through every single day. Those experiencing in healthcare, lack of access to resources, advocacy. So it definitely helps us shine the light on all these issues, and also in the part of the representation, by understanding that, and especially here in the state of Nevada, we are the most diverse state by capital. We are the state with the most foreign-born by capital. So it really looking at how we are represented, yes, and the spaces that we are represented. I would like to say that we don't claim the board trustees, majority Latinas, please don't blame us for it. And the representation on also, it is part of us, and then it's part of our culture. It's also rooted in our culture, that racism among us, right? I'm an immigrant. I come from an immigrant background. I made it. Good luck to you, right? And so we put our hopes in individuals like that and say, oh, this one looks like me. Her story resonates with my story. But when they're holding those positions, they really do not represent us. And I think it does create elected officials or leaders that understand that they serve diverse communities, and so they create spaces for their voices. That is extremely important, because you may not look like the community or a majority of the community that you represent, but their voices are part of your administration, or your voices are part of the decision-making process. And so I really applaud those leaders that actually acknowledge that it takes more than one to represent a community, that it takes coalition building, that it takes working with different individuals with different backgrounds, because and especially some of us, really the work that we do is, the core of our work is to fight so our communities have representation, right? And year in and out, the resources that are invested in during the census, during the pandemic, during election time, is that constant fight to make sure that our communities have representation. And I just also want to just say something, Jay. Public option goes into effect in 2025, where everyone can have access to insurance regardless of immigration status. But it also goes back to having leaders that understand that more needs to be done. So they support those pieces of legislation, that maybe we can make certain resources available to everyone, because that's the way the system is built. Undocumented communities do not have access to government assistance. And so at least creating those subsidized resources that may cost them money. No one wants anything for free. My community takes pride in working hard and paying for their own things and having access to things, and said, I am a provider to my family. But it's really just creating the spaces. Like, it's not asking for free health insurance, but asking for the opportunity to purchase insurance, because undocumented communities don't even have an option to purchase private insurance.
So representation was actually one of the first social justice topics that I really resonated with. And the reason for that is because I'm a product of Clark County School District. I was born and raised in Las Vegas. And it took until my senior year of my undergraduate degree for me to have my first woman of color professor, and she was Chicana from San Diego, California. And just seeing that representation and being able to see myself in someone who's in a leadership position, it totally changed my life, and it was one of my motivating factors for me to enter the academic space and to pursue education. And it doesn't just stop at representation, it's also about the experience that people have when they're in that academic space or when they're in the ivory tower. Before entering the current PhD program I'm in right now, I was a part of another master's program here at UNLV, and I felt very alienated and isolated because I didn't see any representation in the faculty. And that totally changed my perspective on education too. Because if we don't see representation, if we don't see ourselves, especially within an educational context, if we don't see ourselves and our educators, then that totally affects the knowledge that we're able to produce, that we're able to absorb, because inevitably the content would be coming from their perspective, and if we don't have any representation, if we don't see ourselves in those educators, then we're missing out on so much. When we talk about representation, it's not just about the people that you see, but the experiences that you have when you get there. And for me, as a brown woman, as a Filipina Chicana, as a biracial woman, it's hard for me to see representation in those leadership positions, but when I do, it is totally life-changing.
Thanks for sharing that, Reina. So I heard a range from no to absolutely not. So, but one thing you did reference, and I'm ask him to kind of go out of order here and call an audible. I'm going to ask Congressman Horsford, if you could just join us on stage for a minute. You mentioned the equity cabinet that was assembled by the congressman. So elements like that have become more important over time. I can say this too, and I see one of my Muslim sisters here too. As a practicing Muslim, I've not traditionally had people who have represented me really very much of anywhere in the country. When civil rights issues have come up, we've had to represent ourselves in Nevada, all across the country, really all across the world. So as a result, it spurned a new generation of leaders that we've had to cultivate internally to be able to engage in the work. But Congressman Horsford, if you could just join us on stage. I just want to hear from you.
Where is the law?
You know, what was the importance and value that you found in having diverse voices at the table to be able to support the work that you're doing?
Well, I'll stop recording, but if it's illegal to do that, you do realize you're going to be in trouble.
Appreciate you.
Okay.
Incredible panel. Each one of you are tremendous leaders. Thank you for bringing your voice to this discussion.
Okay, ask why.
It's absolutely frustrating